Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, and yes, I'm a glutton for punishment. I stand by the title of this video, Why Collective Shout Might Be Worse for Women Than Not Safe for Work Games. And contrary to the people who claim I don't look into things before I talk about them, I did a bit of a dive into the founders and the origins of Collective Shout. And I know far more about the game No Mercy than I ever wanted to. I had not even heard of that game before this. And if you notice my eyes are red, it's from the bleach I had to apply to them after watching clips of this game. That's a joke. Now, yes, watching clips is not the same as playing the game. It's an imperfect thing. The focus of this video is not going to be the game No Mercy, but there does seem to be some truth to what the developers said, that the game has been mischaracterized to an extent. It seems more about domination than rape. And some people would say there's no difference. And okay, we can have that debate later. But, on the subject of incest, it's a stepmother, not a blood relative. And so, I don't know how this game got past Steam's rules. But again, I haven't played the game. I've only seen clips, and the developer did admit that they sort of oversold certain elements of the game as a marketing strategy. I suspect they now think that was a mistake. Obviously, it's not my thing. I don't get it. They are correct that that domination and step family themed porn is very popular. I don't get that. And there is graphic sex in the game. And I had trouble figuring out exactly how many women were involved in it because they all look so alike to me. The developers clearly had a type and went with it. And that is where it muddies the waters about sexual objectification. But with Collective Shout, there is a clear Christian conservative underpinning to the organization. The co-founder is an anti-sex, an anti-abortion feminist. Yes, those exist. They're small. It's a contentious designation, but Melinda Tankard Rice is an anti-abortion, a pro-life feminist. A lot of the board members and workers on this nonprofit have World Vision as a credit, which is a Christian charity. And what's wrong with that? Absolutely nothing. There are certain elements of the partnerships that Collective Shout has as well that do raise red flags. And I want to be clear, this video is not about saying Christianity is all bad. There are a lot of Christians that are not anti-abortion. Plenty are. But there is a tint askew, if you will, towards the attitudes regarding women and sex in general when you get this very patrician, patriarchal teaching that if it's a, complementarian patrician worldview, then all sex is dirty except for sex for procreation, and any woman who likes sex for anything but procreation is de-womaned in this worldview. You're tainted, you're dirty. It's purity culture. And that, we do know, is far worse for women than obscure, not safe for work games. Now, the other red flag here is complementarian victimization, that your gender role is more important to your goodness than any individuality you might have. So if you are an unfeminine woman, if you don't woman correctly, well, you must be corrected for the betterment of society. And this is where we get into benevolent sexism. And I will, let's start with benevolent sexism. Okay, that's a good place to start. Now, this is going to be a bit of a mess with my browser. I couldn't find a place to put my face that worked completely, but we'll do our best here. There's two types of sexism out there: hostile sexism and benevolent sexism. Hostile sexism is negative in tone, disparages women who challenge traditional gender roles and ideologies, for example, professionally successful women. It communicates a view of gender relationships as competitive, with women wanting to dominate men, notice the language, and threatening men's higher status in society. By contrast, benevolent sexism has a more positive tone. It idealizes and flatters women who embody traditional ideas, such as stay-at-home mothers. This is where the pro-life feminism comes in, and portrays women as morally pure and uniquely caring, but also as weak and unable to take care of themselves. Benevolent sexism portrays gender relationships as cooperative and complementary, with men in charge of protection and security and women dedicated to nurture and reproduction. Both hostile and benevolent sexism encompass three components, which are assessed using the ambivalent sexism inventory: paternalism, gender differentiation, and heterosexual intimacy. Paternalism refers to men's superiority over women, either aggressively in hostile sexism or protectively in benevolent sexism. Notice men's superiority over women, right? Gender differentiation draws a line between men and women, distributing roles associated with power to men in hostile sexism and nurturing roles to women in benevolent sexism. Heterosexual intimacy accommodates heterosexual men's dependency on women for sexual satisfaction. Hostile sexism aims to restrict women's use of sex to manipulate men, and benevolent sexism idealizes women as necessary to complete men. And this is important when we look at groups like Collective Shout that really, really heavily leans on women's inherent weakness and requiring protection. And it's male-dominated society's responsibility to protect women, instead of creating a society where neither hostile sexism or benevolent sexism are a meaningful lever, which means women are not equivalent to men. Obviously, men and women are different, but the feminine is seen as equally good to the masculine and is not restricted to just child rearing. And that's why I keep going back to the anti-abortion feminism, is that worldview centers motherhood as the main role and source of fulfillment for women. And so any sex, no matter how consensual, is dirty, unless it's trying for a baby or producing a baby. Okay? And this matters when we talk about this, because long term, it's not just bad for Black and brown women who tend to be seen as less feminine, more sexualized, more aggressive. I'm a ginger. I can relate to that too. Okay, that will come. Keep that aggression thing in mind, because that's going to become very important later. It fetishizes Asian women as more feminine because they're meek and subservient, right? Sorry, Asian ladies. I know that's a really terrible stereotype. but and South Asian women fall under that as well. So of course, the only women who are really full women are those traditional women. But it's also terrible for lesbian women, bisexual women, pansexual women, and, trans women. And some of you watching this video may not care about that, but it is, one of the things they've gone after is, and they're denying responsibility for this. Collective Shout is saying that Itch and Steam went above and beyond, well, at least Itch went above and beyond what they were asking for. But taking no responsibility for the outcomes of the way you chose to fight. Yeah, that's one of those things that these women are leaning on. Women are meek and we need protection. So absolutely nothing is their fault. And you can look at the Collective Shout website. I'm going to link to all of these pages so you can look for yourself. Okay. Collective Shout is a grassroots movement challenging the objectification of women and sexualization of girls in media, advertising, and popular culture. We target corporations, advertisers, marketers, and media, which exploit the bodies of women and girls to sell products and services and campaign to change their behavior. More broadly, we engage with issues relating to other forms of sexploitation, including the interconnected industries of pornography, prostitution, and trafficking, and the growing market in the sale of children for live distance child abuse and trade in child sex abuse dolls and replica body parts. Collective Shout is a not-for-profit company guaranteed and blah, blah, blah. We are non-party political, non-partisan, and non-sectarian. Any individual who finds common cause with our goals is welcome to join. And I find that one very interesting, because you see National Center on Child Exploitation, that's Christian. Releasing Children from Poverty, Compassion in Jesus' Name. Like, this is a pretty Christian organization. So the fact that they felt like they needed to like lampshade that, ding, 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 that triggers my spidey sense. Okay? And you'll see all through World Vision Australia, all through chairperson, you scroll down, either people came through World Vision a lot of the time, or they came through the speeches of the founder, Melinda Tankert Rice. So there's a pipeline here. And what's interesting is it intersects with the Dwork side. For people who don't know what the Dwork side is, it's my name for the very, very, very intensely sex-negative left-wing feminism, academic feminism, in the tradition of Andrea Dworkin, who is, well, we'll say a very complex and problematic figure in feminism because she said all sex was rape. Now, Caitlin Roper, who's the campaign manager and the person behind a lot of the tweet stuff that we're going to get into, has a book out. And it's called Sex Dolls, Robots, and Woman Hating, The Case for Resistance. Now, woman hating is a direct reference to one of Andrea Dworkin's books. And this isn't limited just to like pedo dolls, right? This is any sex doll, any sex bot, and obviously you can see where the hate on for video games comes here, right? Oh no, they can't hate. They're women. They're meek and mild angels. You see how the benevolent sexism leverages here? Now, I'm going to read a few biblical quotes now, just to be cheeky. Because if they're worried about, domination fetish and men dominating women, well, obviously this is just to show an example. of how things taken out of context can really shade things, because I selected 3 passages from the Bible, and in no way do I believe all Christians believe this. This is the English Standard Version, which is popular with Southern Baptists and Lutherans. I know that even my Southern Baptist friends don't believe this stuff. This is complementarian gender ideology. And the difference between complementarian and egalitarian gender ideology is very important to understanding this stuff. Because, well, egalitarian gender ideology is people are individuals. You judge them as individuals. Women can do whatever they want. Men can do whatever they want. Complementarian gender ideology believes that men have a role, and that is a good and godly role, and you stay in that role. And women have their role, and that is a good and godly role, and you stay in that role. And my Southern Baptist friends are egalitarians, not complementarians. There we go. But here it is. Ephesians 5:22-24. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to everything to their husbands. Ephesians 5:22-33. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. It's just repeated again, right? Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. I don't know why this website duplicated the 22 there, but do you notice wives should submit in everything to their husbands? Husbands, love your wives so that they might be purified. Now the line from 1 Corinthians 7:1-40. This one's a trip. Okay. It is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her body, but the husband does. Now, if I indulged in the same tactics as Collective Shout, I would leave it there for maximum impact, that the wife does not have authority over her body, but the husband does. But the quote finishes, likewise, the husband does not have authority over his body, but the wife does. Do you see how one line can absolutely change the meaning of something? Good, because now we're gonna get into the response. Now, this is from back in April, when this thing originally kicked off. And it's going to look very, very familiar. It's the exact same tactics Feminist Frequency used in, we're being harassed, therefore we must be right. Gamers are horrible, right? And I want to show you some of the spin that Collective Shout engages in. And I want to just clarify the record on stuff, because there's language in here that I think is deliberately manipulative. They may believe it, but it's manipulative. See, so not real, freedom of expression, don't like it, don't play, responding to gamers' defenses of Steam rape game. It's not a rape game. Well, you know, players assume the persona of a man who rapes his female family members as revenge for his mother's infidelity. And it talks about following our complaint to the Australian Classifications Board, the game was taken down in Australia. Now, if you read the letter, the game was not taken down in Australia because of its content. It was taken down in Australia. I'm not sure how it got listed in Australia in the first place, but it was not rated. And a lot of online stores will not allow a game, I believe Nintendo is one, to be unrated. And in Australia, it's a legal requirement that films, computer games, and certain publications be classified before being provided for sale. So it had nothing to do with the content of the game and everything to do with the fact that it had no rating. No ESRB, PEGI, whatever Australia's is, right? But the letter's right there, and this is what they do. They hide the truth in plain sight. But they say, in response to our campaign against the rape simulation game, we were subjected to harassment and abuse from gamers defending their access to it and proving our point in the process. You know, it's like, why don't you go after real exploitation? And it's like, oh, flag waving, we, blah, blah, blah. And they pull this line always gets me. We also recognize that men's violence and abuse of women and children does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in a context where women are objectified and portrayed as things existing for men's sexual entertainment and use, and one where violence against women is normalized, trivialized, and even glorified. We acknowledge the role of female objectification, male entitlement to women's bodies, and attitudes of sexism as contributors to men's violence against women. Does it contribute? Well, we'll get into the studies in a second, but the biggest factors are poverty, conflict and war, breakdown of services for people, displacement connected to war, and stress in the home. These are around the world the big gender-based violence. It's about power and control, which you could argue, well, yes, then it's fair to go after games like No Mercy. But it doesn't, if you don't have something closer to home going on, a game like No Mercy is not going to appeal to you. It's a reinforcing spirals model where you have this predetermined thing where it's okay. And so you see nothing wrong with, you get a different message from a game like No Mercy. Instead of it being something that's curious and get down in the muck with taboos, it's, oh yeah, this is right and good and the way the world should work. Like, no game gives you that core belief. And even the studies that Collective Shout cites say it's only a small to moderate correlation. In the one study that I could find, the other appears to be miscited or has been pulled for whatever reason. You know, and the reason that I read that Bible quote to be cheeky was, you'll see here, the messages about men and women reinforced in this game, that manhood is associated with violence, control, and domination, and women deserve and enjoy rape, fuel real-life violence and abuse of women. First of all, if a woman enjoys the sexual encounter, it's not rape. 1, dominance play is not the same as rape, okay? Rape isn't sex. Rape is about power and control. And the equating of showing sexy women means women get raped restricts women's freedom of expression. Any woman like Megan Thee Stallion or Sabrina Carpenter who decides to depict themselves in a sexualized manner, often to subvert and make a point, well, they're just anti-women. And they're not allowed to have the same protections. They're not allowed to express themselves in the way they want to because it's bad for women, as if they're not women and all women want the same thing. But this next one, this just completely warps in plain sight the complaint in this tweet. And I did verify the tweets that they claim were like threats and all that stuff. Most of them have been deleted from Twitter. So they're obviously like trolls or bots, right? But they're still up here, even though the account has been wiped out. But what about games with the sexual violence against men in them? That's the quote. And apologies to the person whose, screen name they used without permission. I'm going to defend you here. So they dismissed this guy as whataboutism. But the point he was making is if sexual violence is wrong and it's wrong to depict, shouldn't all sexual violence be shut down? Not just sexual violence against women. But that is not, they strawmanned instead of steelmanning his complaint and called him irrational, which is awesome because this is an arguing tactic used against women more than it's used against men. Nice job, ladies. It is an irrational claim that by objecting to a game that promotes male sexual violence against women, we must therefore endorse games that promote sexual violence against men. That is not what he said. It isn't what he said. Period. End of story. It's why don't you include it, not that you endorse it. That's just, in fiction, sexual violence is entertainment. I don't even see a quote for this one, right? So we have to take, and it's the whole thing. No Mercy does not merely depict incest and rape. It glorifies them. Well, that's one of those arguments. I'm wording this very, very carefully. That's highly subjective, whether something just depicts a thing or glorifies a thing. Does Baldur's Gate 3 glorify incest because you can go into a brothel and sleep with siblings that are drow or evil race? Still, is Saravok having an incest baby with his own daughter depicting incest or glorifying it? Does Game of Thrones glorify incest? Well, you could argue that yes, it does, because 300 years of incest doesn't tend to produce women who look like Emilia Clarke. She doesn't have a Habsburg jaw, right? So what just depicts it versus what glorifies it, this is really in the eye of the beholder. I found the depiction of Daenerys in the first season of Game of Thrones absolutely revolting. It missed the mark. And you could argue that, oh no, the intent by having a close-up of her boob so close that you could see the bumps on her nipples, that was the viewer objectifying her. So you can blah, 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 blah. HBO, I call, hey, boobs out for a reason. And now it's just man ass instead of women. It's a lateral move. But the idea that media says it's okay, I don't think, and this is where we get into that First Amendment thing that I keep going, any movement that attempts to do the end run about the U.S. Supreme Court games are protected speech argument via coercion through another country's legal system, I will oppose, is because of stuff like this. Because the U.S. Supreme Court, I believe rightly, said that freedom of speech overrides the degree of harm that we are seeing created by that speech. That doesn't mean there's no harm. It's just weighing the significance of the rights. Some harm is allowable to, prop up the first principle that freedom of expression must be protected, even expression that you find disgusting. Now, do we have to protect children? Absolutely. Absolutely. But there's no children being harmed in No Mercy. Everybody is an adult. And you could argue everyone there is a consenting adult, because again, if she enjoys it, it's a domination fetish. It's not rape. Right? And that's something that when a feminist group is saying, look, it shows that women enjoy rape. What? That's you protest too much, methinks, attitude. And you'll notice the quote they used here. They don't have a tweet. They have a Steam review. I'm not even into domination stuff, but I still found it appealing for some reason. I guess I'm a man after all. So the people who played the game didn't read it as rape. They read it as domination. It's a different thing. I know male doms. And they make sure their partner is enjoying it. That is a central part of domination play that I do think that I do think is misunderstood. And I do think games depict poorly, including, again, Baldur's Gate 3, Dragon Age Inquisition, that kind of stuff. The rough stuff is not depicted in the way it works in a healthy way. There's no discussion. It's, okay, I want to sleep with the Iron Bull. It will be painful. Like, no, you're supposed to talk about what you like and what you don't like. This stuff is irresponsible in a lot of cases. Do I defend its right to exist? Yes. Can I critique how it's executed? Also, yes. This is how we get better. This is how we don't sort people into those deserving of protection and those not deserving of protection. Discussion, dialogue, working it out, not coercing and manipulating people into bending to your will the way these online movements do. Next one. It's a game. It's not real. You can't rate pixels on a screen. How the hell do you argue this? It's just objectively true. It's well documented that the media we consume shapes our attitudes, what we think is normal, acceptable, and desirable. Those are two different things. Those are two different things. Media does not shape our personal likes and dislikes. It just makes us feel that what we like is weird. I like short, bald guys. I feel that, right? But they start talking about sexual choking in porn, right? What does that have to do with rape? You know? Porn eroticizes this act of violence, resulting in consumers' acceptance of it. Porn is a form of media that influences how people behave in their real-world sexual encounters. I don't know of any woman that decides, oh, well, I like being choked now because it's in porn. Someone may try it to see if they like it, but it only shapes our sense of what's normal, not our actual likes and dislikes. And this is very, very clearly documented. And this is this bullshit cultivation theory that was wrong when feminist frequency tried it. It's wrong now. If you don't like it, you don't play it. 50K Savage Clean with a Megan the Stallion icon. You know, yeah, this is worth platforming, right? And it's, oh, we don't like it and we don't play it, but we have to live in a world full of men and boys who do, and whose contempt for women and girls and entitlement to our bodies is reinforced by games like this. You notice it doesn't say caused, just reinforced. Now, I don't know how many boys got their hands on this game, right? Like, probably not many, because not many people heard about this game before this. But this idea that it feeds into attitudes, that is closer to the truth. But still, it can't override healthy attitudes in the people that, the people around you. You're not going to suddenly develop a taste for this stuff because you played a video game. Now, then it's just the Twitter shit posting that they claim. Kill yourself, they claimed is a death threat. I mean, get raped at Nuke Africa. That's clearly a troll. You know, this woman is so ugly, I doubt she would need to worry about rape. Like, that's like the shit I get in my YouTube comment sections. It's low quality bait. But this woman here, Madame Savvy, they lumped her in with Kasumi Feetlick and DHHDHD30 blah, 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 blah. But I checked this account, and as far as I can tell, because she's got a YouTube channel too, as far as I can tell, that's a woman. And they lumped her in, and they have said on her Twitter account that they continue to misgender her and call her a man, which feeds into that thing I said about the benevolently sexist complementarian gender ideology. The minute you defy what is godly for the feminine, now you're not a woman. And that's a big problem for women, because the minute a woman likes sex, which is an inherently dirty act, well, then they are not part of that protected group anymore. And we know that people who have who have benevolently sexist attitudes are more likely to blame women when they are sexually assaulted. And, you know, they get into this idea, but women fantasize about rape. Women don't fantasize about rape. Women have dominance fantasies. You know, the most popular book series in America, A Court of Thorn and Roses, there is multiple sexual assaults, but it's okay because he's her mate. You know, they have a mate bond. And I'm worried about that, but we know that the biggest problem with Gen Z right now is that they're just not dating or, you know, mingling with the opposite sex. So, you know, it's like Japan, they have so much freaky porn, and, you know, they're not dating, they're not having much sex, their birth rate's in the toilet. So, I mean, if the hentai capital of the world is not showing a correlation between a guy like building a giant tentacle and going out and attacking women with it, well, I think that's pretty solid evidence that there is no causative impact on this. And another thing, getting rid of this game won't help women who are raped. And they don't respond again to that complaint. They insult the person who said it. We would posit that men defending their access to a rape simulation game, it's not rape, it's dominance, aren't particularly qualified to weigh in on the interests of rape survivors and what may or may not be helpful to them. Their concern is touching, though. Women and girls who have been raped or sexually assaulted might argue that media or games that treat rape as entertainment or portray the trauma and abuse as a fun activity for men are not in their best interests. Now, who are these women? And I know that games like The Witcher 2, I think, overdo it. It does. I mean, there's sort of an allegorical thing of the way women were treated during and after the war in Poland with Soviet occupation. But there's some lousy attitudes depicted in that second game and some in the first game. By the third game, they cleaned it up. And to me, that's how it works, right? It's coarse and it's not well handled. And I mean, they switched creative directors and it got much better in the third game. And there's an example of, yeah, there's still violence against women in The Witcher 3, but I don't think it's treated as sexy anymore. The way the fade to black scene with Hansel and Vess was in the second game. Now that was more coerced than violent rape, but still a lot of people missed that, you know, not only was it, rape, how much it took Vess down. It was basically, she can't even avenge her own assault. The men have to do it for her. And some people will think, well, that makes sense. You don't want her to get hurt again. She's a soldier. She risks getting hurt every day she's on the job. And this is when we take a paternalistic view of female survivors of sexual assault, and we erase male victims of sexual assault completely. The shame associated with that status of being a victim. That's why they stopped calling it victims. They started calling it survivors to try to get over some of that stigma. If the idea is that you can never have a fulfilling life again, well, that's more terrifying than the assault itself, isn't it? And the benevolent sexism at the root of stomping out any not safe for work game on a service, and they claim they didn't do that, but the proof's in the result, right? When you do a Puritan campaign involving, Christian conservative groups like the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, you're gonna clamp down on all adult games, because the labeling systems they see it as sexual content in games like The Witcher, not rape. And, quite frankly, I do think that it is more about how it's handled, which is a debate, not a question for censorship, not whether it's there at all. Because some handlings of it are better than others. Yennefer, for instance, in the games and the books, there's hints of something that happened to her. Not like the show that just went like, what the fuck was that torture porn shit? But the hints at it, the fact that something happens and she doesn't talk about it, gives it this weight and gives it this believability and really informs her character and why she does what she does, presents herself the way she does, and so on. So all content, I think the Orin being an incest baby is weird in Baldur's Gate 3. It's that edgelord Larian stuff that I don't like, but it is what it is. There's a lot of decisions in this game. I was like, the why thing, the why gift. Like, why did you do that? What did that add? Baal is the Lord of Murder, not the Lord of Incest. What? But just because I'm grossed out doesn't mean I think it should be banned. It's just, it does happen in the world. And the worst offenders for femicide, for instance, are in the developing world where video games are not exactly a going concern. So if it was video games at the root of this, instead of video games just reflecting this, well, we wouldn't see the femicide and the sexual assaults and all that stuff in parts of the world that don't really have a big video game culture. So this is putting the cart before the horse. And I do think that it's important to protect these types of speech, because some of the games, especially on itch, that got caught up in the delisting that may be temporary. They might just be going through them and deciding which ones to let through and which ones not. But some of the games that got caught in the purge were games where female developers were telling stories based on their own experiences. And those deserve to exist enough that I'll deal with the weirdo gross incest in Baldur's Gate 3. You see how it works? Like, we can be adults about it. I can go, ugh, and why? And I don't think that added anything and it was poorly executed. But I'm not going to suggest banning the game, right? I never, ever, ever support coercive tactics. And then they get into, so glorifying murder is okay. Totally misses the point about it. The point here is rape is so bad we're not allowed to depict it. So murder's okay because there's murders all through video games, right? But they reject that argument. I think that's actually a fairly fair argument, because why is it that rape is considered worse than murder? Well, because it takes away a woman's purity, right? You're still alive. You can still have a life. When you're murdered, you're dead. But we see women who are assaulted as soiled. We see men who are assaulted as no longer men in a lot of ways. And that's that benevolent sexism creeping in. And that's why groups that function on this patrician puritanical version of respect for women really need to be challenged and really need to be questioned, because are they causing more harm than good by forcing women back into the modesty box? I say it's very, very likely that they are. And I have some evidence for that, but I finally found the studies. We'll get to it. I get we're on 46 minutes and climbing, but this is important. Okay? I can't find the 2022 meta-analysis. The way I find these things is I put in the year and then I search the quote through Google Scholar. I found the 2021 thing based on this quote, but it's an odd one because here it is. The researchers on this are not exactly titans in their field. Where is it? I have it on another screen. Let me fade over while I find it. One of them's like a commerce person. Oh, great. Oh, here we go. Okay. So here we go. I found it here. Sorry, I got a lot of links here. But so one, School of Business, Virginia Commonwealth University. Another, School of Communication. Another, Psychology and Neuroscience of Cognition Research Unit. Faculty of Psychology, Speech and Language Therapy and Education. None of the people who authored this paper have a primary specialty on gender and any of this and psychology. So you have to take this particular citation with a grain of salt and wonder why they pick this one. Not because it's terribly high quality, but because it agrees with their pre-existing opinion. They found the opinion, then they found a paper to back it up. And because there is a big push from Christian groups and sex negative feminist groups to go, oh no, all porn bad. This is something you really have to watch for. There are much, much better conducted studies out there that say, and even that study, that was the one that said it's only a small to moderate correlation. And that, even games that were just sex led to declining attitudes involving women. Now, I've read other studies that said it actually helped women's opinions of themselves. So, it's all over the map. The reality is you have to prove a harm here, not just say, well, it could happen, because that's violence in video games all over again. And you'll notice on the Collective Shout website, it says, A number of recent meta-analysis have found that violent video games are linked with increased aggression. Now, that is true, but aggression is not violence. And one of the nasty kickbacks on both hostile and benevolent sexism is that because men are supposed to be the aggressive ones and women are supposed to be the meek and weak ones, when women display aggression, these sexist attitudes believe she has it coming. So if we demonize aggression, we make it more likely that people who subscribe to these views, especially men, are going to think that aggression is a provocation. And we got to be really, really careful about that, because one of the things we have to work on with girls is this idea that you can't be aggressive. You have to be nice at all times. And that's why, even though girls get better grades, they're not getting the top jobs in business, in politics, in all this stuff. There is a real bias against women showing any sort of aggression. If you're aggressive in ways that aren't sexual, you're crazy, you're unhinged. Welcome to my last couple weeks, right? I dared to have an opinion and say it emphatically because I'm trying to be entertaining. It's fucking YouTube. No, I'm unhinged, I'm crazy, I'm stupid, right? If you're sexually aggressive, well, then you're just a slut and you're bad for women, right? That's the problem with this thinking. And that's why I actually think that organizations like Collective Shout are more of an issue for women and the attitudes towards women, because they back up, they prop up that very patrician, Christian-based, and again, I know not all Christians agree with this. Many of them don't. I'm not saying it's the Christian's fault. I'm saying it's a particular complementarian attitude within Christianity. But as long as we prop this up, women get emotionally, financially, sexually, every kind of abused for being mouthy or bitchy. There's a direct link there in terms of attitudes. And so we must protect and champion healthy aggression. Not all aggression is bad. And I apologize for the ad that's going to be on this article, but this is what I'm going to land with, because this is 2 years old, but it's a study on porn. And what have we learned from 50 years of studying porn? All right, these people are qualified to talk about it. 50 years of studying porn. What they found is that not all porn is equal. Okay? If you look at the academic research, it says it's basically contradictory because it's so diverse. So you'll notice here, pornography research is contradictory, incomplete, and often biased. Okay? That's important, because if that's so, you can't take the couple of papers that Collective Shout cherry-picked. You will notice that these experts, 50 years studying porn, I feel sorry for them. I couldn't take 3 days of no mercy, but it's this heteronormative Christian idea that sex is only for procreation that they believe is the underpinning of, the issues with porn and violence against women. And they talked about the fact that feminist porn, ethical porn, LGBTQ porn is shaking that off. And it's funny, because remember when we started with the letter that it was the Australian government that said, oh no, this game isn't rated. No mercy, you can't sell it. But there's a whole bunch of things about Australia here. So about an Australian parliamentary inquiry heard evidence that many, if not most, children will access porn at some stage despite it being illegal. So banning it all isn't going to do much. And I agree. I think that all the attention on these games, I mean, I was exposed to way more of these games than I ever wanted to be to research this video. But what these people who have studied porn for 50 years have said, that the problem is a lack of comprehensive sex education in the schools, which these Christian groups are never going to go for because the particular type of Christianity that they come out of. We hypothesize that young people, when they reach puberty, might go looking online because neither their parents or the schools are telling them what they want to know. You don't want pornography to be your child's only source of information about sex. Not because it's harmful per se, but there are things it does well and things it doesn't. And what it doesn't do well is talk about consent. If you leave the sexual education to a pornographer, that's like letting them learn how to drive by watching The Fast and the Furious. Young people look to porn for sex education, but it's not that. It's entertainment. She says that in Australia, sex education for most young people still focuses only on fears about pregnancy and STIs, even though most people, most of the time, are having sex for pleasure. We're still, in 2022, focused on a sex-negative education, she says. It's this heteronormative Christian idea that sex is only for procreation. Boom! That's what the actual experts were saying at the same time that paper that Collective Shout cited was talking about. And what's interesting is in looking this up, I learned a really, really interesting statistic, and I have to pull it up because it's on a linked article, but a statistic about who is actually having the most pleasurable sex. And this is really, really interesting to me because it belies this idea that, you know, being puritanical and shielding people from everything and all that stuff, this is the way to go. Because, and I'm trying to find it here. Forgive me, my computer's being slow because I've got so many damn windows open. But it basically says that straight women have the fewest orgasms of any sexually active people. So gay men, plenty. It's like in the 80s% of the time. Gay women, less, but still up there. Straight women, no, it's called the orgasm gap. Here it is. I found it. Okay, so don't take my word for it. Why they're showing me ads for toupees, I have no idea. But this is about defining sexuality. Okay, research shows that gay and straight men climax during about 85% of their sexual encounters. For women having sex with women, it's about 75% of the time. For women having sex with men, it is 63%. And the researchers said heterosexuality is essentially broken. The starting point for sex education should be, what are we going to do to fix that? And they say better sex education. Better sex education. Not banning pornographic content. Better sex education. Talking about it more. Listening to people. Being interested in mutual pleasure. And if people have domination fantasies, even if they're a bit rough, not my bag. Who am I to judge? Right? That's the only way this works. Not through hair on fire shame campaigns targeting the Australian government and credit card companies because it's the easiest way to do a run around the First Amendment. And y'all wondered why a couple weeks ago I was going, no, I don't support coercive tactics. I don't support an end run around the First Amendment. And it's because of shit like this. Because this is where they go. This is where they always go. And this ridiculous, like, misery porn publishing tweets from trolls going, kill yourself, kill yourself. Like, that's my regular week. So what? You know, is it wrong? Sure. Is it a real threat? No, it's not. It's people fucking shitposting and being assholes. And I'm sick and tired of encouraging women to be afraid of this stuff because it's not a credible threat. It's not. Kill yourself is not, I know where you live, I know where I can find you and I can get to you. That's a credible threat, and I have had those. So, you know, this kind of nonsense, it's stupid internet bullshit, and it's wrong and it's petty, but women are not stepping up and talking about this stuff and making content because they're afraid of this stuff, because they think they've done something wrong to bring it upon themselves, because of this bullshit modesty and purity culture that messes up women and messes up men in completely different ways. You know, the reason I think some guys are into dominance fantasy is they feel so stepped on and demeaned and belittled because they end up getting these really, really emotionally abusive bits of content by, you know, the 666 and dating advice and all that stuff. And they feel small and they feel like, no, real men dominate. Real men take what they want. And it's a misguided attempt to get their masculinity back. There are healthier ways, but I think we got to stop spreading myths about why a lot of men consume this content. And again, domination fantasies are not rape fantasies. They're different things. No Mercy blurs the lines because there is violence, but if a woman enjoys it, it's not rape. But get consent. And like the article says, we don't talk enough about consent. Everything's forced. Everything's coercive. And this is the problem with these coercive tactics. Despite the fact that they claim to be advocating for women, they are perpetuating the idea that the only way you get stuff done, the only way you get what you want, is through coercive force. Guess who suffers from societies that perpetuate that idea? It hits women and girls and boys who have to be toughened up and severed from their emotions to be proper men so you can go out and get what you want, force your way in, and we're right, so our might is right. These coercive tactics are just with the insults and the demeaning commentary. This is toxic masculinity pantomime. The Collective Shout website is all through it. Instead of just sticking to the facts, arguing it dispassionately, and having compassion for people with whom you disagree, they're engaging in the exact same bullshit, take what you want, dominate all aggression that they claim to oppose. They use coercive tactics, just like any rapist. And it's the normalization of those tactics that really cause the problem. Because look up the statistics. It's pretty shocking how many guys in college commit sexual assault and didn't know what they were doing was sexual assault, because the whole idea is it's romantic and sexy. You just do it. You don't talk about it first. We got to talk about consent. We got to do comprehensive sex education. Not leave sex education to porn. And we gotta stop using these admittedly very strange games as a distraction. Because we know what works. The real experts, not the freaking business majors, they know what works. And this has been consistent since the 90s, since I started with this stuff. I know I'm old. This is all a distraction. And that means more women are going to get hurt. And more girls are going to grow up terrified. And more guys are going to be like, what the hell? And they're walking around these ticking time bombs. Because take what you want. Not that way, right? Coerce them into having your way. Not that way, boys. These mixed messages are harmful. Help support this channel. If you like this content, please become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. This group does target people, so I'm taking a risk by doing this. I'm not terribly worried because free speech. But yeah, if you like what I do, like and subscribe to this channel. And yeah, support me in any way you possibly can, even if it's just, a nice comment, because, well, I get a lot of shitty ones. Thanks for watching this very, very long video.